Is this world a hologram? This is the question we're going to explore today. One of the things we talked about before is the way that we perceive things. And specifically, we looked at the hand as an example of how we perceive. And remember, we said that when we perceive something, the first step in that process is that light is first reflected from whatever it is that we ultimately see. Right? So this thing that we're calling a hand, whatever it is that's here, reflects light back to my retina, and ultimately that's interpreted by the brain and then seen, quote unquote, right? It's seen in the mind ultimately. What is seen? The interpretation of reflected light. So what we see, what you're seeing now as you're seeing my face, for example, is not what is actually here, because you see only that aspect of light which is reflected from here and then subsequently interpreted by the brain, right? So when we say we see something, that something that we're seeing is merely an aspect, a fraction of what it is that is actually here, right? So what is it that is actually here? What is it that is fundamental here? So one way to think about that is that there is something like information that is maybe not at the basement or at the foundation of the universe, but that is closer to the fundamental nature of the universe. Something like information. All right, and we don't have to have an exact definition for it. This is just to bring the mind along, right? To appreciate a different aspect of things. So something like information, which isn't hard, which doesn't necessarily have a shape and a color, but something more fundamental that is ultimately expressing as this world. Let's call that information. If we were to take a look at a hologram, and let's say a holographic plate, that holographic plate, I took an example here of a piece of paper. Let's say this is the holographic plate. Now this holographic plate has recorded information on it. And when light shines through this holographic plate, that information then presents itself as a 3D image. All right, so when we're looking at a hologram, there's recorded information on a plate, which light passes through and appears as a 3D image. And then we can navigate that 3D image, right? We can walk to the right of it, we can walk to the left, and by doing so we can appreciate different aspects of that image. Why? Because all of the information that is needed for viewing that image from different angles is encoded on that holographic plate. Right? Makes sense. So we have the fundamental information, and then you have the image, which is the projection or interpretation or expression of that information in three-dimensional space. All right? So now, in the case of this image, what we're looking at now, let's say you're seeing this body right now and this face, right? So as you're seeing this, what is it? What is the plate which has the recorded information which presents as this? Right? Let's assume this may be a hologram. Who knows? Let's say it's a hologram. Then, if it is, you can do all the same things that we would do with a regular hologram, right? Like, for example, if you were here in this room with me, you could walk to one side of me and you would see what the body looked like from one perspective. You could walk to the other side and then see what the body looked like from this side. You could walk behind it and see what the body looks like from that side, right? So the information that is encoded is presenting itself as all different kinds of views, right? So what is the holographic plate in this case, right? Well, we said that there is some fundamental information, and that information holds the relationships between different aspects of that three-dimensional image, right? So if this holographic plate, for example, let's say the image associated with it was a soccer ball, right? Then The soccer ball has different patches. Let's say it has black patches and white patches on that ball, right? It's a black and white soccer ball. So the information contains the relationships between the black patches and the white patches, right? How much distance is there between two of the black patches? What is the spatial relationship between all of the black and white patches, right? What is the shape that the patches take, right? Are they pentagonal? Are they hexagonal? So all of this information is stored on that holographic plate regarding the entire spatial orientation and the spatial relationships of the elements in that hologram, right? So in this world, if this were a hologram, the same spatial relationships are there. So if I wanted to see what's happening on the West Coast in California, I'm on the East Coast. So if I want to see what's happening on the West Coast in California, I would have to navigate the hologram, so to speak, right? I would have to take myself to that aspect of the hologram, either through an airplane or through a car, driving for several days, and reach that aspect so that I can view the same thing from a different perspective. Because what I'm doing is I'm using the vision that is localized within the body, and therefore the body has to be moved to appreciate a different aspect, a different view of the hologram, right? Again, what then is the information encoded in? What is the plate itself, right? There's the information, and then there's the plate itself. So in the case of the holographic plate here, the information is encoded here on this plate, and it comes alive when this light shines through it. So I would suggest to you that in the case of this world, we can say that something that is fundamental is consciousness itself. And it is consciousness that shines through this holographic plate of information that presents this three-dimensional array, this three-dimensional hologram, right? It's one way to think about what is happening here, one way to appreciate what's happening here. Now, if that were true, if it's true that the world is something like a hologram, then we would expect things like being able to perceive things non-locally, right? One of the properties of a hologram, for example, is that the holographic plate, the recorded information, every aspect of it has the total information for the total hologram, right? So for example, let's say again that this encoded the information for a soccer ball, right? The entire sphere that is a soccer ball. Well, if I took just a bit of the information here, like this, right? I tore off this small piece of the recorded information. The information that is recorded here would still present an image of the entire soccer ball, right? In other words, even though this whole sheet represents a soccer ball or encodes the soccer ball, if I tear off an aspect of that and look at this, this is not only going to present to me an aspect of the sphere, like a tiny corner of the soccer ball. No. The information that is encoded throughout every aspect of this, right? The information that is here is, in a sense, everywhere recorded on the holographic plate, such that even a small aspect of it contains the entire image. Now, what does that mean in the case of this world if we apply the same analogy? That means that the information that is wherever we are, right? So I'm in a physical location, right? Which part of the I? The physical structure, right? So when we say I and you, the convention in our society is that it pertains to the physical structure and the localized personality. So when I say I am in a physical location, the physical structure is in a particular place, and we're assuming now that this is a hologram, right? The physical structure, the three-dimensional expression of that information is localized in a particular place. However, if we're saying that the information that is in one part of this plate, right, in any aspect of this plate, contains the expression of the entire picture, of the entire hologram, then what we're saying is that the information where this body is localized and your body is localized, and really where anything appears localized, not just in the world, but in the entire universe, anywhere there seems to be any localized presence, localized form, localized information, there itself, the information for the entire universe is available. Does that make sense? So just like the information for the entire hologram of the soccer ball is available at every point on the holographic plate, similarly, the information for the entire universe is available at every point wherever we are, because that holographic plate itself is not a localized thing in this case. And if that's the case, we should be able to perceive things at a distance. This is what psychic abilities are about. This is what remote viewing is about, right? It essentially taps into the information, into the non-local information field, and therefore, when light, as it were, is shined through that information field, then that aspect of the hologram, which aspect? Whichever aspect there's interest in, that aspect of the hologram expresses itself in this three-dimensional viewing structure.